Hey everybody, Attorney Somm here. Welcome back. I recently had the opportunity to attend a Bordeaux on PRIMEUR event. My next video will be discussing my thoughts regarding the 2020 vintage in Bordeaux and some of my takeaways from that event in particular. But for this first video, I'm going to be discussing the PRIMEUR system and the pros and cons of that system for wine collectors. In Bordeaux, many of the top chateaux sell their wines through the PRIMEUR system, or wine futures. And so this typically begins the April following harvest. And so currently we're in the midst of PRIMEUR for the Bordeaux 2020 vintage. PRIMEUR begins by the producers making available samples to those in the wine industry and to journalists and wine critics. They're able to evaluate and taste the wines and then come out with their reports and evaluations and oftentimes score the wines. After that, the producers, often acting through their negociants, will make available a small amount of the wine that's referred to as a first tranche. This first tranche will act as a sort of a trial balloon for producers and the negociants to test the market and see if any adjustments need to be made to the pricing. If so, those adjustments will be made for the second and subsequent tranches. This entire process could last several months and will conclude with the wines being made available for purchase on a futures basis, oftentimes in June or July. It should be noted, however, that not all producers participate in the PRIMEUR system. For example, Chateau Latour stopped participating with the 2011 vintage. Latour was concerned that there was a lot of speculation in the wines and wanted to discourage that. And in addition, they also liked the idea of waiting to release their wines until they were more approachable and ready to drink. So for that reason, they withdrew from the PRIMEUR system and started selling the wines after bottling and after they had some aging. Of course, not all producers are as well financed as Latour, however, and so one advantage to the producer of the PRIMEUR system, they're able to get a cash infusion 12 to 18 months before they would otherwise if they just waited and sold their wines after bottling. And so this is especially important for smaller producers and or producers who don't have the same type of financial backing of a Chateau Latour. Now there's a couple advantages to the PRIMEUR system for consumers and wine collectors. First, especially in top vintages, some of these wines can be very hard to obtain after they're released. And so by locking in your purchases through wine futures, you're guaranteed to get your allocation. Second, in many instances, the prices for futures are often less than they are after the wines are bottled and released 12 to 18 months later. There are some disadvantages, however. For one, the prices don't always go up. In the 2011 PRIMEUR release, for example, the prices were much higher than the reality of the vintage justified, and so many of the purchasers for the 2011 PRIMEUR actually paid more than those wines sold for after they came out 12 to 18 months later. Further, a lot of the pricing for these wines is based on the initial scores from the critics. This is potentially problematic, however, because many of the wines being sampled during PRIMEUR do not even reflect the final composition of the wine that's going to be sold to the public after bottling. In many instances, it's just the current expectation of the producer, and they're doing the best they can to try to come up with what they expect the final blend to look like. So you could have a situation where the scores are based on something that's not even the final wine that comes out later. So you definitely need to take those scores with a bit of a grain of salt in many instances, especially for those producers who don't finalize their composition until after PRIMEUR. And finally, it's important that you buy from a reputable wine merchant and that you don't fall for any scams, some of which are unfortunately out there. So make sure you do your homework and choose a reputable merchant to buy your futures if you decide to participate. I hope this video was helpful. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to my channel and be sure to watch the next video when I'm going to be discussing my thoughts regarding the 2020 vintage in Bordeaux, as well as my recommendations for those who choose to participate in the PRIMEUR for Bordeaux 2020. Until then, drink well.